Shalom, good afternoon. Thank you for coming. My name is Rami Efrati. I'm the self-nominated Cyber Ambassador of Israel, one of the founding members of the Israeli National Cyber Directorate, and I'm very proud to be here today with the panelists. Let me first of all say something in Hebrew. How many Israelis do we have here? יופי, אז איתכם אני יכול לדבר בתכלס. כשאני אגיד את שם האורחים, מחיאות כפיים סוערות, כאלה ישראלים שיודעים לארח, נכון? You don't understand, it's okay. I know that you speak the language, but not so good. As a matter of fact, resilience became such an important word, or even much more than that, that we planned to have only one panel on resilience. And suddenly what happened? So many people decided that they would like to hear many other professionals in order to make sure that they understand much more about resilience. So after this panel, which has, the others didn't come yet, so which has the best panelists that we could have found, we are going to have others as well. But before, and in my age I can forget things in the future, let me just say that without the angels, I call them, of the ICRC headed by Gili Drob and Professor Ben Israel, there is one angel here. Her name is Ronit Shapira. Without Ronit, אמרתי לכם ישראלים, כן? Without Ronit, we couldn't have done it, and it's really, thank you very much for arranging everything. She was not sleeping at all. We were having fun by eating in Tel Aviv, if we found a place to eat in Tel Aviv these days, and it was just great. I also want to thank very much the panel members. They invested a lot of time, and especially Samir, who arranged all the people that came especially for this panel from overseas. אני לא עושה את זה יותר, די. אבל עד עכשיו שיתוף פעולה יפה, אני חייב להגיד, של שעות אחר הצהריים. And therefore, after thanking Ronit and all the extraordinary team, and thanking all the panel's members, I would like to thank you for coming after lunch. Not easy in Israel. Usually people, you know, either they are going to sleep or they are going to somewhere. And especially for the tourists who decided to come here today and not going to the beach, but maybe they will do it after this panel, because don't miss the excellent weather and the excellent time that we are having this in Israel. And now, without further ado, we're going to have a 1-hour panel. I really hope that we will have the chance also for you to ask many questions as you want. These are the right people to answer you. If you're not going to do it, I just remind you, we have an FBI agent, so which is the first time that we have an FBI agent, and thank you, Ben, for coming here today. And let me just quickly introduce the people who are here. They will speak a little bit about themselves afterward, but I just want to mention their names and their present position. I'm starting with Samir Sharif. Samir is a great friend, Chief Information Security Officer of Absolute. I do recommend you, for each one of the panelists, read later their bio. They will speak a little bit about it because they want to speak about resilience. But it's very important to understand, because as you have realized, if you have been in the morning here, and I hope you have been here in the morning, that one of the most important things is trust between companies, trust between the public and the government, and you as customers as well. So I'm not sure that anybody heard about Absolute. I'm not going to make any promotion now, but you have not heard about others as well. So this is Samir Sharif. Samir? Thank you very much. The second one, he has already spoken, but I want to present him. Mr. Benjamin Stone, Legal Tel Aviv, FBI. So he's not an Israeli yet. He still believes that if he will yell, somebody will listen to him. But who knows? I know, FBI, in all the movies. The next one is Sajan Gautam. He's the CISO of Averst Bank. Where is it? And an Israeli one He has a very good English accent, as a matter of fact. His name is Boaz Gelbord. He's a Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer, the CISO of Akamai. Have you heard about Akamai? Yes. And the last one is Sunil Yu. He is a well-known guy. He also wrote a book and much more. He came with a special concept. And he is the CISO and Head of Research at Jupiter One. These are our people, and I'm asking you quickly to say some more words about you. I think it is important. Why did you decide to join this resilience panel? Let's do it quickly. Samir, you are the one to bring them.
First of all, thank you all for coming to this panel to listen to all of us. I decided to really join this panel for a primary reason, which is really just the challenges we're facing as CISOs, as security professionals, which is purely around complexity. And resilience really is a core component of what we really should be thinking about versus just more tools, more solutions, just really making sure that we have a line of sight of how we manage our technologies so that we become more resilient. So you'll hear more about that as we progress.
Thank you. Sajjan.
Hello, thank you for having me here. Thank you for the panelists. And the primary reason I decided to join is because of the panelist and the moderator. And the second is, as a CISO, I'm more involved in the business resiliency than ever because if you think about it, information security or technology is the biggest risk and the opportunity for any organization. So CISO has the responsibility. And I wanted to learn and share some. Thank you.
Mr. Stone?
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? If you can't hear me, raise your hand. All right, okay. I'm not a cyber CISO. I'm not a technology person in that sense of the word. But I had the privilege of leading a group of investigators in Philadelphia who were cyber crime investigators. And really, one of the purposes and missions that I have in general is promoting partnership, right? So the goal that I want to put forward is encouraging partnership between the public sector, specifically law enforcement and intelligence communities, not just necessarily here in Israel, but around the world, and making sure those doors remain open and encouraging communication prior to, during, God forbid, and after any kind of event that would happen. So that's my primary purpose here.
Thank you. שכחתם, זה ממש יפה. בועז.
Hey everybody, thanks for coming. Hopefully everyone can hear me. My primary reason for being here is that Samir asked me, so I can't say no to Samir. And of course, there's wonderful other panelists here, a lot of friends. I think the topic of resilience is so top of mind today because when I look at where we were, even 2-3 years ago, but certainly 5 or 10 years ago, just in terms of our society's dependency on very complex systems, very complex technical systems, things are moving at such a pace that if we don't look at resiliency really, really closely, we're going to find ourselves in an ever more vulnerable situation where critical systems can go down, whether they're medical or whether they're other critical infrastructure. So I think it's just so important for us as a community to wrap our heads around this and look at what we're doing from a resiliency standpoint. Certainly at Akamai, kind of depending how you measure it, we carry 10-20% of global web traffic. So we're sort of a critical part of that overall technology ecosystem. I know that many of the organizations represented in the room similarly have critical functions. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
So I also came partly because Samir is very convincing, and he convinced me with lots of good food as well. So before being the Chief Security Officer at Jupiter One, I was the Chief Security Scientist at Bank of America. And in that role, I had the luxury, I'll call it a luxury, to think about the hard problems and understand how we should tackle some of these hard problems. What I saw, what Boaz was hinting at, was this notion of resilience being a clear and evident need in this era of time. And what I observed when I was at Bank of America was a very distinct set of periods that led up to the need for resilience today. If you wonder why resilience is such a hot topic, well, just real quickly, I'll go over 40 years of history. So back in the 80s, computers became cheap. We bought tons of them. The first problem we had was, what did I just buy, and what business function does it support? 10 years later, 1990s, we started seeing viruses. So we came up with things like AV and firewalls. 10 more years later, we have all these logs. We're like, what do I do with all these logs? How do I find intrusions? 10 years later, the 2010s, we have breaches everywhere, and we're trying to figure out how do we kick the intruder out. What's interesting is the 80s, we had an identify problem. The 90s, we had a protect problem. The 2000s, we had a detect problem. The 2010s, we had a respond problem. The 2020s, we have a recover problem. And so what is recover and what is resiliency? I think there's a very close tie there. The 2020s is the age of resiliency, is the age of recover. So why are we talking about resilience and recover? It's because this is the age where we're seeing those problems emerge. There you go. No.
How many of you are from startups, companies all over the world? Excellent. You can be benefited here because there is not such a big chance like in many other panels that you have really the CISOs, not people who are just speaking generally. And here they are, and I see companies here from Compugen, Nanolog, Resec, so many companies. This is your chance. Speak with these guys and let me start working. So what I would like to ask, and first of all, I would like to ask all the panelists, we spend so much money and resources on security. Briefly, please tell us, would you say that there are proportionally secured companies? Do you think that you are secured? Let's start with you, Sunil. We'll go this way.
So I pride ourselves in saying that we have as much of my environment is insecure, okay? Because I've designed my environment so that it doesn't require security at all. So what does that mean? We can either design everything to be secure by design, shift left, build security in, right? All wonderful premises, all wonderful things that we all seem to espouse. But does more security actually make us resilient? And I would argue, no, it doesn't, okay? Instead, it actually makes us weaker and more fragile. And the perspective that I've had in working at Jupiter One and actually at Bank of America is, how do I design systems to be designed in such a way that it doesn't require security at all? So that perspective is easily understood if you think about it in terms of your body, all right? You have cells in your body. Some are very short-lived, but they're also exposed to everything, all this harm, okay? And other cells that are very long-lived, but they have lots of shielding. What is very short-lived? Your skin cells. Are they secure? No. What are long-lived cells? My brain? Is it secure? Yes. I mean, or at least in terms of having lots of shielding. Am I spending money shielding my skin? Well, at the organization I'm at right now, the answer is no. Why waste money on something that is designed to fall off and turn into dust? However, if it's a brain cell, I'm going to shield that. I'm going to spend as much money as I can, as I'm allotted, to make sure that that those things are shielded. Unfortunately, I think in many organizations, we don't know which are skin cells and which are brain cells. And so we waste money on skin cells.
Interesting way to present it. Boaz, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so I think it's a complex question because terms like security encompass so many different concepts in them. And if we look at just on the face of it, we invest a lot more kind of proportionately in security today than we have in the past. I would argue that most organizations today probably have more of the classic security infrastructure. They have people like CISOs, right? That didn't exist largely in the 2000s in a meaningful way. So there's somebody at a senior executive level who's responsible for security. They're able to do better risk management, I would say. So I think most large organizations today have a way to look at kind of what their risks are, where do they want to invest, where do they not want to, et cetera. I think some of the ways where we're less secure, I think there's a greater kind of security divide, kind of like a digital divide, where you have security haves and have-nots. And you look at larger organizations, they are somewhat driven by regulation, but also driven by their own needs. they're much better able to assess what is the likelihood of them having a bad event. There's a whole insurance industry that's built around that. When we look, for example, at the financial industry, I mean, in the United States alone, I think there's 7,000 kind of banks and credit unions and so forth. And there's a real drop off there between the ones who've invested heavily, the sort of main players, and then others who just for a variety of business reasons kind of can't afford to do that. So I think it's kind of a split picture in terms of who's secure and who isn't. And just the final thing I'd say on it is that the complexity that we have today in terms of just the sheer number of providers and interfaces, et cetera, that even many of the startups here in the room deal with means that despite that investment, I would argue there's a greater kind of complexity and sort of security risk that's.
Ben, do you have to, can you add something, maybe also about the legal part?
Sure. So I just wanted to key off what Boaz was just saying a minute ago when he says about the haves and the have-nots, right? So I'm going to give you an example from my family. My daughter is 24 years old. She's starting out in the workplace, and it reflects the lowest common denominator, right? And it's the individuals or the companies that are not educated or not doing what they should be doing, combined with the threat actors, be they national security threat actors or criminal actors, who don't really need to use sophisticated techniques to gain access to information, right? Because last time I checked, which was yesterday when I Googled it, Office 365, when you buy it out of the box as a product, has MFA turned on, or not turned on, has MFA built into it that you can turn on. My daughter works for a small business that didn't turn it on. So what happened when she got phished with the whole Office 365 link, right? Which came from somebody else who didn't have it turned on, right? So instantaneously, my daughter is the lowest common denominator and is the victim of a cyber breach. It doesn't take a rocket scientist anymore to conduct an effective attack, right? Which is on off what Boaz was saying, the have and the have not, right? So those that have the money and the sophistication will use, MFA on their phone and all this good stuff, which is the industry standard. But small businesses are still not using tools that they have for free because they simply don't have the capacity and ability to do so. I'm going to have another story for you that's timely and relevant. He talked about different types of securing your devices or securing yourself. I just got a new phone yesterday. I spent an hour and a half trying to get it working, moving my stuff from my old phone to my new phone. And one of the more complicated things was I have Microsoft Authenticator on there with like 4 or 5 different authentication numbers that scroll in. And I have to go and reset 4 or 5 different items in 4 or 5 different ways. And at some point, people will just throw the phone out the window and give up. So again, it's a have versus have not, complex versus simple. And the lowest common denominator, the simple threats, the easy attack vectors are the ones that I got.
Thank you. Samir, please.
I'm going to pivot off of what Sunil was mentioning earlier around just the concept of knowing what is the risk that you're dealing with, what you're trying to protect. Ultimately, aside from the fact that you may be part of a much larger global regulated business versus not, is really the difference between whether you can afford to protect everything and go after and buy every single product on the planet, or really think about risk, right? Really, from the concept of really what makes sense, what are you trying to really protect as a business, and going back to the basis about asking the risk question. A lot of us as security professionals don't do that. We jump too quickly looking at the minor attacks and all the tools that plugs in for every single challenge in that ecosystem and try to solve for it. But fundamentally forget about, number one, how to keep it healthy, how to keep it running all the time, how to get the right data, and really manage risk, which is something we're all struggling with.
Let me just add real quickly. Bank of America, our CEO told the world at Davos, we have an unlimited budget. Okay? We have an unlimited budget. Even with an unlimited budget, we do not want to secure everything.
I'm going to double click on what Sunil said and what Boaz as well as Samir said. So I'm not going to repeat all the things that they said. But one thing that is, are we spending more money? Are we adding more products in the mix? Yes, we are. Are we relatively secure than what we were before? Yes, we are. Are we proportionately secure? We are not. Because there is a not good return on investment that we are getting, not just from the money side, but from the complexity, because we are adding more complexity.
Let me just interfere for a second. I ask how many companies, startups are here? Can you raise your again? I mentioned you, Sepio I didn't mention, Sysoteria I didn't mention. Who else is here? Which company?
Yeah.
Reveal, excellent. Ah, you came from NICE, you went to Doron. Okay. Yes, please. Medisize, what are you doing? Okay, the reason I'm asking, because one of my roles when I was in the Israel National Cyber Directorate was to promote the Israeli industry, to take the threat and make it a business opportunity. And one of the opportunity that you are listening, while I'm listening to you, and I made my mistakes as well, is that whenever you are coming to speak or to decide which product you are going to come out with, you need to ask the CISOs whether maybe it's the best in the world, but maybe nobody needs it. And you have now the chance, and I'll give you the time, to ask questions about it, to understand much more about how you're going on the right way. And this is very important. And I'm also asking you and all the other people here, prepare your questions. Also the lady from Australia who came all the way, and all the other people who are here. Let me run directly to Sajan and ask you, in the banking industry, what other areas does this complexity impact, apart from security? How does this impact your business resiliency?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Good questions. Banking as a business itself is a very complex business. It does have so many interconnectivity, also a lot of downstream and upstream. Anything you do change, it does have upstream and downstream. But I'll try to answer it from two different types of complexities. There are many complexities, but one is technology complexities. Another is business process complexities. And so, as an example, business processes associated with customer experience and customer interaction. On the technology complexity, let's think about it. One product does have many-to-many relations with another product. So if we are changing one product, it does have implications to many products. So whenever we do think about technology, we do think about, hey, what would happen if I do this? What would be the downstream effect? What would be the cascading effect on it? So that's the technology component. Another, looking into from the customer experience part. If usually a customer has a multiple relationship with the bank and the banking products. I may be an employee of a bank, and I may also be a customer of the bank. Now, how do we establish that relationship? And whenever we do change some of the processes, underlying processes, how would that impact? Because from pure security point of view, I can add more product, more processes to make secure, but that would have customer impact on it. Because if I want to go to the bank branch versus I want to go to a digital platform, I want to have the seamless experience. But whenever we do introduce more processes and the tools, there is more chance that I will not have that experience. Now, think about it. In terms of the resiliency, if we do add those kind of complexity, can I recover it quickly? Probably not, because more product you add, harder it is to recover. So that's the state we are in.
Would someone of you would like to comment or add something?
Yeah, so what Sajjan was saying goes to the similar comment I made earlier around the more security you add, the less resiliency you end up with. And I want to make sure people understand the significance of that statement, because they are, oftentimes we think of security and resiliency being the same thing, that somehow the more secure you are, the more resilient you are. But hear what Sajjan just said. It actually makes you less resilient. They are opposites. A system that is secure is really hard to recover from, right? Because you have all these controls on all these things that you have put in there. But if you design a system to not have to worry about security at all, you can easily blow those away and restart them and recreate them. The principle that I've come up with to articulate a design towards that is what I call the DIE triad. So DIE stands for distributed, immutable, ephemeral.
And if not, you die.
DIE, yeah. So you want these systems to DIE, because what happens is the more that you do that, the faster you can recover.
And everybody is speaking about recovering, coming back to business as quickly as possible. I don't know how many organizations are really trying and make a real exercise to make sure that whenever they need to have their backup, whenever they need to find out whether the backup system are working, is it really working? And that's what is in many places happens. Everybody is very happy, nothing is happening, I'm fully secured, I have my backup. Everything that you said, I did it, I didn't add things that maybe will affect all my other business, but now is the time. It happened. How quickly you really, not what the guy who is selling you the system said, how really quickly it is going to be to get back to business. Before going to the next speaker, anybody would like to ask a question? I want to give the chance, not the chance, the time also for the audience. Yes, please present yourself. Leo. Excellent.
Yeah, so it turns out the more distributed, the more immutable, the more ephemeral, the less availability, the less integrity, the less confidentiality I need. So if I use Akamai as a CDN, do I need to worry about the availability of any one server? It's highly distributed. I don't need to worry about the availability of any one server. If it's immutable, meaning not changing, do I need to worry about the integrity? If it's very ephemeral, meaning very short-lived, do I need to worry about the confidentiality? So do I care about the confidentiality of these numbers? And the answer is no. Go ahead, take a picture, post it on Twitter. I don't care, because it's gone by the time it's ephemeral. Your skin cells are very ephemeral. Your brain cells are very long-lived, okay? We also have another analogy of pets and cattle. Pets, you love, you take care of, you take to the vet. They are very long-lived. Cattle, it gets sick, you shoot it, and you move on, okay? We want more systems to be like cattle, and very few. We're always going to have pets. We will always have pets. And for those pets, we absolutely need to secure them with CIA. But as much as possible, before we try to secure something, try to make it resilient. Try to make it DIE.
And to add to that, think about what's critical, right, for your business.
Correct.
Wise. Okay, I'll try to get closer. So think about what's really important from a solution perspective for your business. No matter that you may be procuring, installing, and running multiple solutions, at the end of the day, there are very few number of critical tools and products that you want to persist, make sure it's resilient at all times, right? And that's where I think what Sunil was going at is there should be things you should care about and others that you can rely on from other capabilities to at least build resiliency.
Let me just add, and also prioritize them.
That's right.
Because if you know the priorities, then you can decide where am I going to invest more, When less, where can I or should I take a risk? When which kind of risk? Any more questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Right.
What do you measure? Okay, why do you have to, what do you see? Good or bad to you?
Excellent question. So for me as a CISO, there are really, I would say maybe more, but at least minimum 5 solutions that I worry about. My data discovery and protection solutions like the Carbon Blacks, my antivirus types of solutions, whether it's Defender or McAfee, whatever it may be, my endpoint solutions. And at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do from a resiliency perspective is collect telemetry data. Because at any given point in all the devices, no matter whether you're in the cloud, and of course, obviously, most of you are remote workers now, you're connecting with a device, right? So each device is an attack path, and we know data-wise, you just have to look at Gartner, you will see a number of incidents and unhealthy solutions that are out there at any given device at any given time. So a percentage of your technology platforms that you're relying with your employees to interact with you may not be as secure, as healthy as they should be. So for resilience, I measure telemetry data about what's going on from my products. But unfortunately, I only find out after the fact, right? It takes time for SIEM to logs to ingest, my SOC team to respond, alerts to kick in, and you will lose that period of time, right? We built the business around building persistence on critical solutions. We're the only ones who do it. And we're the small, big company in a way because our technology has been in, hundreds of millions of devices worldwide for more than 2 decades. But as Sunil mentioned, we're now at the age of where resilience really does matter. So we're all starting to talk more about it. But then it goes back to the same concept of you have to prioritize. You can't do everything, but you have to pick and choose what's critical for you as a business. And even from a measurement standpoint, for things what I share with the board, I don't go in front of the board and report on vulnerabilities, all those static numbers that you produce. It's more about risk posture, right? Collection of product health, data security, and maybe even important availability of your critical infrastructure. Those are the types of things that are important for measurement.
Let me offer real quickly that DIE is actually extremely measurable. Like D, for example, ephemerality, the unit to measure is time. So let's take Ben's example earlier where he got a new phone. Ben, how old was the old phone? 2 years old. So how resilient is, if you recycled your phone every day, if you were wealthy enough to recycle your phone every day, you'd be very resilient to the loss of your phone, right? If you recycle your phone every 2 years, well, there's a lot of cruft that's accumulated on it that makes you less resilient to the loss of your phone. But fortunately, we've designed the phone such that if I lose my phone, I go buy a new one, and iCloud allows me to restore or recover, right? But there are things that are not fully backed up, which makes it less recoverable. But the point ultimately is, if you design your systems and how you operate to have, for example, an attribute of DIE that you can directly measure and to make it as distributed as possible, right? I can imagine that Akamai has that value well understood, and that is a resiliency value. How changeable is it, or how not changeable is it, which is very measurable. How long-lived is it? And so the longer lived something is, it naturally becomes less resilient, and that's a very measurable quantity.
Thank you. The question was a very good one. Do I think that you are dealing with these things? No, I have to charge you for the answers. It's not going so easy. But let's go directly to Boaz again, and those who are going to have more questions, please prepare it. I think this is a good chance to have answers from the right people. Boaz, Akamai, your customers have some of the most complex environments. What are some of the biggest challenges they face as a result? And let me ask you another question quickly. How do you include their needs into your resiliency strategy, please?
This is a great question. We support most of the world's major financial institutions, e-commerce, and so forth. I think for us, the critical thing is to kind of think through the points that Sunil was mapping out in terms of how do you make sure that you're resilient against a broad set of scenarios. And the challenge is, and that's part of what I think makes security a really exciting field, is that it's constantly changing. Right? So if you think about denial of service, for example, DDoS has been with us forever, and it was a technique that was used decades ago, but we still see it being a major vector for activists who want to bring down people who disagree with, or ransomware. It's a big component of ransoms where you'll do kind of a piece of a DDoS, and we see ever more innovative techniques in terms of how folks are able to sort of exhaust resources of a company in an asymmetric way, right? So the way that DDoS works is that you do just like as the attacker, you send a little kind of request, and you make the receiving entity, you kind of drain their resources. And I think the challenge for us as sort of a systemic provider is I kind of call it the boats off of Manhattan during an apocalyptic event type of problem, which is, some of you might have seen there was a write-up a while back. It was during COVID that there was a big business booming of people who would sort of sell kind of very well-to-do folks in Manhattan a get-off-the-island boat. So in the case of an emergency, you'd have this boat and you'd pay, let's say, 50 grand a year. And then when it happened, you could kind of call up and you'd go to 34th Street and the boat would take you off the island. Problem was that they kind of sold the same boat to like 50 different people, right? And then when you have the I Am Legend, for those of you who've seen the movie, scenario happening where the big apocalypse happens and you're calling to get your boat, it's you and 49 other people waiting to get into the same boat, and it can't take all of you. And DDoS is a little bit of a similar thing, right? Because you're essentially selling pipes, and you want to make sure that you're selling pipes so that when they're needed, right, and when there is that big DDoS campaign, you're able to provide that resiliency. So I think that that's something that's going to be really important for entities like ours and others that are sort of systemic providers. I do worry a lot as we go forward as a society that we have these points of strain that we haven't fully understand. We understand what it means in the day-to-day for them to be resilient, so the stuff that the regular kind of attacks. But what happens in this sort of black swan type of event is something we've mapped out less.
Thank you, Boaz. Just to mention one important thing about Israel, once a year there is a huge DDoS attack on Israel. It's called Ops Israel. It is exactly on April 7. It started on, I think, 2012, which is one of the best things happening to Israel, by the way, because the country, the government, the Israeli National Cyber Directorate take it very seriously. And then it's not like in a regular exercise. You don't have any hint. You don't know how we are going to be attacked. You don't know who is going to do it, what time, the guy from Indonesia, the guy from Turkey, and everybody is taking it very seriously. And DDoS is still being one of the most effective, creating chaos also to the public and also to many of the companies. And we find every year the DDoS attacks are growing more and more and having more sophisticated tools. So I thank you for mentioning it, because I think it's still very valid as well. And Ben, I would like to ask you, please, what can you share in terms of the difference between public and private sector when it comes complexity in addressing resiliency?
Well, so I think the way I'll answer that is how the United States has identified its critical infrastructure, right? So there's a presidential directive, and it talks about how many, gives responsibility to the Department of Homeland Security and CISA, and there's been 16 different sectors that have been identified, right? And you can go through the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. I went through one. I think I counted just within that one sector, 25 other subsectors, so you can keep going on and on forever, right? So, and then each country has its own way of identifying its critical infrastructure. So Israel's a little different. I think it identifies it by industry and piece of industry, as opposed, or individual companies as opposed to sectors. So the point about that is none of it's mandatory, right? So you can't really compel anybody to do anything. You can just offer advice. Whereas in the public sector, and two sort of relatively recent examples is the UK government and the US government. So I think in the UK in 2021, They have their, what do they actually call it? They call it the UK minimum resilience standards, right, for the UK government. And then in the United States, similarly, an executive order which requires agencies to enhance their cybersecurity, right, and their software chain integrity. But they provide minimums, right? And they also say, well, you should shoot for the minimums, but try and do better. And the other thing that in the government, certainly in the US government, by the way, if you're confused by my English accent, I completely understand that. So in the US government, the most recent, guideline for that, or encouragement and/or mandate, is that companies that provide services to federal agencies are now required to share information, right? So that information with things like the FBI, other investigative agencies, to share indicators of compromise in a standard form, so that everybody benefits, right? So by trying to set an example within the public sphere, trying to encourage the same within the private sphere. So I think that's how you do it. But again, it comes down to money, right? So even though the US government is going to encourage, force cooperation in the contracts that companies write with the US government, what's the business going to do? They're going to factor in the cost of that, and the cost of the contract's going to go up. So somebody's paying for it, and it's the taxpayer ultimately. But it's a bottom line analysis in any organization, be it public or private sector, and these things do cost money.
I think that this question is also relevant to some more of the panel member, like Samir and Sajan, and if you would like to add as well, please.
Absolutely. I think, Ben points out really a critical need for all of us to partner more and share intel. But part of that is also all of us kind of, at a minimum, following best practices, right? And this is the elephant in the room. And so the challenge, or the analogy I'll give you, is you all have a laptop at your home, you patch it, right? You see the pop-up says update your computer, you click the button, you wait 30 minutes, reboots. It's all easy, but when it comes to industry, that's not easy. Some of these solutions run critical tools and technology that customers rely on, and scheduled patching cycles is normally what everybody goes through at a business level. And that gives adversaries a small open, time window frame for attacks. So the partnership that Ben is really talking about is us actually being able to share intel and data about risks and vulnerabilities long advanced before it actually becomes public in some cases. So most of us as CISOs, we do subscribe to those collaborative tools that gives us insight on what's going on. And we rely on that to share intel and even patching recommendations and how to deal with the TTPs, how to monitor for it, etc. But the complexity comes right back to the core of the issue. At the end of the day, no matter how many ransomware news you read about, there's always an individual who gets breached in some manner, or a device gets breached. And, that's the whole concept of us not really focusing enough on resiliency. So Sunil mentioned earlier, you can't recover if you're not resilient. And to be resilient, you need to know what your risks are, right? So, but it's all compounded together.
To add to Ben's point earlier, public and private partnership, I do think, at least in the United States, the public-private partnership is better, and information sharing is better within the financial sector. And there is a maturity in the information security in the financial sector, including the resiliency part. But also, it is easy, relatively easy, because if you have to do the same thing as Samir mentioned, if we have to do the patching on our industrial systems, OT, it is very hard. It is not practically possible. There's a lot of opportunity there. So I would leave it at that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the understanding of what we share and even the responsibilities is a bit clearer. if we consider the words that we use a bit more properly. So we use the word cybersecurity to describe all that we do, but I think we should break up what we do into two buckets. One is cyber safety, and the other one is cyber security. If you're not sure of the difference, then you can add words like food in front of it. So what is food safety? Hygiene, compliance, inspections. And we always, and then what is food security? Well, food security is like starvation, poisoning, those sort of things. We always say compliance doesn't equal security. Do we actually understand what we're saying when we say that? We're saying safety doesn't equal security, and that's true. So safety is compliance. We practice cyber safety. Now let's talk about responsibilities as well. So a safety incident versus a security incident. A safety incident, we actually all want to know what that safety incident is because we could all be harmed by safety incidents, and best practices in safety are things that we absolutely should be made as public as possible. But security incidents, what happens with those? Well, law enforcement gets in, police gets in, and then all of a sudden information is really tightly held. So are we wanting to share safety information, safety incidents, or are we actually wanting to share security incidents? One last analogy. Airplanes, airplane safety. If I'm Boeing, if I'm Airbus, what's El Al? Is the anyway? If I'm Boeing or Airbus, my job is to make sure that I have an airplane that is safe, doesn't fall out of the sky. It is not my job to dodge Russian and Chinese missiles. Okay, if the airspace is full of Russian and Chinese missiles, whose job is it to make sure that the airspace is free of Chinese and Russian missiles? Isn't that the public sector? Isn't that the government's job to keep the airspace, the cyberspace, free of those missiles? Whereas this is my job as private sector to make sure that the airplane doesn't fall out of the sky on its own. One last point. At what point does a Russian missile become a bird strike? It is my job to make sure that I design airplanes to survive a single bird strike. A bird strike, a Russian missile today, 10 years from now, at least 10 years from now, will become a bird strike. It becomes an expected thing that you have to handle. Is it 10 years? Is it 5 years? It's definitely not 1 year. Okay. And I think the startup ecosystem helps us accelerate that to make that a Russian missile turn into a bird strike. But we need to make sure we understand the problem that we're dealing with, like what is our responsibility versus what's government's responsibility. And because we use safety and security as the same word, because we call it cybersecurity, we're oftentimes confused about what we share and what our responsibilities are.
I can tell you that some of the Israeli defense companies were, if they are here, are very happy to hear about what you said. We have solutions for this. So hopefully they will take you as a speaker. Boaz, I'm sure that you would like to comment to this as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that distinction there. And I think what makes it very complex in the cyber landscape, that delineation between what is governmental responsibility, what is not, is very unclear. Certainly what we've seen in the last couple of years is that companies are largely on their own dealing with the kind of criminal activity you would typically expect the government to help you with it. I mean, despite the efforts of the FBI and other agencies, there's just a kind of global component to this that's really, really hard. I think that there's been sort of three primary drivers in cybercrime explode. The fact that you can move money around easily, the fact that there's jurisdictional challenges, you kind of do one thing, but you're sitting somewhere in Eastern Europe and Russia, you're attacking a US company, you're no likelihood not going to face consequences, and the fact that we have a very, very vulnerable ecosystem, all the vulnerabilities that we've talked about. And when you sort of combine those three, you get the billions in ransomware and so forth. I think if you look kind of short term, I don't see that situation improving much as we go to a much more kind of interconnected world, everything that's happening at GPT today, and all of those sort of pieces. If I can, I just want to pivot slightly I know there's a lot of startups in the room. Just going on a point that Sajjan made. So there's a limit. When you look at kind of like how a CISO looks at security, and how are you looking to there's a logical limit to the number of risks. Sunil said that the BOA CEO said, we have unlimited resources, we're not going to do all this stuff. And one of the primary challenges of security professionals is that there's such a wide range of things that you could do, but not all of them mitigate the kind of risks that you as a company are expected to, or is that sort of reasonably in your interest to do. So I sometimes use the analogy like, for anyone who came here in a car today, how many there are here in the room, or in a cab, how many wore a helmet when probably nobody, right? But it would certainly mitigate substantially a certain degree of risk. If we all wore helmets in cars when we drove, the number of car deaths would be down. On bicycles, by and large, we do wear helmets. Maybe not in Israel, but internationally, people do wear helmets. And so there's sort of a trade-off and a constant analysis that's being done there. I think for cyber startups, there's an incredible amount of innovation, so much of it that we've seen here this week. But you want to make sure that you're not that sort of like wear a helmet in car type of startup, right? Because you may, when you're coming to a CISO, you're like, hey, here's a solution, like here's this really bad thing that could happen to you. Here's how I prevent it, and all of that is true. And yet, that particular solution doesn't make sense for the audience you're selling it to.
I'll add one more to that, and the other one to add on to Boaz is just make sure that your solution is not necessarily ignoring the compliance requirements either. A lot of businesses are regulated, whether they follow the NIST framework or some other framework. There are certain regulatory required controls that have to be in place. So as CISOs, we don't ignore that. We don't necessarily like it because sometimes it's not really innovative in terms of how it actually maps to the risk that we're trying to manage, as Sunil and Boaz mentioned. But at the end of the day, there are critical controls that we have to make sure are there and we're following and we're meeting from a regulatory perspective.
I'm going to follow up with talked about impact and consequences, right? So I just want to point out that one of the goals of law enforcement is to impose consequences on people. And whether or not they are in a place where we can get our hands on them now may be not completely relevant because we have very long memory. And if people have been charged with a crime and 10 years later they decide to take a vacation somewhere else, like Spain, for example, if you've managed a cryptocurrency fraud and you decide to come from somewhere in the Near East, not east of here, but you know what I'm saying, Russia area, well, we're waiting for you when you get off the jetway at the airport, right? So our goal is to impose consequences on individuals who've committed cybercrime, and it is our goal to impose consequences on people who have committed essentially crimes as well in the national security arena, because last time I checked, espionage was a crime. The other thing I want to point out is, and they touched on it, the cost-benefit analysis, right, but the consequences of failure. So, and I think you brought up the Iron Dome, right, which was, and I'm going to use the same analogy, right? So Hamas sends rockets into Israel. They're not missiles. Missiles have guidance systems, right? So they're rockets. They're pointed up at a certain angle and a certain amount of propellant, and it costs like $1,000, right? The Iron Dome is missiles, and they cost $60,000 a piece, right?
More.
Yeah, maybe. So the rockets are dumb. The missiles are smart. The consequences of failure are high. The financial cost to Hamas, well, actually, I shouldn't say Hamas because it's Pidge last time, is low, but the consequences to them kinetically are high, right? So everything is a risk-based calculation on one part, be it, a cyber criminal or a terrorist organization or an intelligence service. But our job is to impose consequences, but the cost of failure to a company for a cyber intrusion, even though you've done everything and you spent $60,000 for your missile compared to $1,000 for their rocket, can be high and bring down your business.
Just to mention, another Israeli successful company just came here, I think. It's XM, and amazing company as well. I think XM is going to be on the next panel. We will be able to hear from them as well. First of all, I thank you very much, Ben. It's the first time that I have the chance to have an FBI agent in a panel which comes with and speak about another angle that usually we don't see it or we are not speaking about it. You spoke, by the way, about the Iron Dome. The Israeli National Cyber Directorate is now doing an amazing project called the Cyber Dome. Not a surprise name, of course. So, and I really hope that all the industries and many of the experts here are somehow involved in this part. Before we are going to end, anybody else who just remember to have a question? Yes, please. Please present yourself. I wonder. Which question? You have to ask him. He asked. Okay, I will ask him.
That's a really good question.
Can you please repeat the question in a simple way because they are recording it and they didn't get this excellent question? Yes, just a second. Do you listen to him? I'll give you a microphone so it will be easier. Okay. Press, media, that's our life.
Yeah, so I'll be short.
Make it even nicer.
Yeah, so the main question was, how do you put your resiliency plans to the test, and how often do you do that?
Hi.
Thank you for that question. I'll give you my answer as a CISO, an internal CISO. That's one of the hats that I wear. And there's two sides of that answer. One is the data points that I need to collect, right? So incident response, security operations, they exist for a good reason. One is to make sure that I have visibility across all the sensors and I can respond. So there's playbooks, the teams do a great job, things are, it's good 24/7. That's part of your monitoring, and you can measure that, how effective you are over time. The other part of it as a CISO, especially with a company like Absolute, is there are some key solutions that I just have to have at least 99% or at least 95+% assurance that they're running all the time. Because at the end of the day, it's the people that I worry about, it's the devices that I worry about from an entry point. And we do it. And I do get sensors post activity, especially failures from an IT for a patch or an upgrade of a device that impacted a CrowdStrike solution that I have, for example. But I can persist that, I can build resiliency on that, and I exercise that. It's effective. So you do need to deal with both sides to learn from the other areas that you just can't run through those types of solutions, and others where you can do it at a BIOS level like we do.
So there's two phrases I'll give you. One is chaos engineering. So what is chaos engineering in the context of pets and cattle? Chaos engineering is shaking your system so that if you don't know what your if you don't know what your pets are, you'll discover your pets very quickly, because the pets are the things that will start falling down, okay? So that's chaos engineering. It'll help you find the pets that you didn't know you had. And then there's creative destruction. Creative destruction is taking those pets and replacing them with cattle. So chaos engineering will tell you how resilient you are and help you understand where you're not. And then creative destruction is the process of getting rid of those pets so that you become more resilient.
Thank you. By the way, I hope that you don't have to educate the market. What you are doing looks to me as amazing, and it's really good. And I don't know him, so I'm not making any. Just to remind you, before we are going to end this excellent panel, we spoke about the main subject was cyber resilience. Is recovery more important than prevention? Each one of you, 1 minute. At the end, how do you summarize it?
I do think recovery is a part of resilience. Of course, it does have a lot of other components, resiliency, but recovery is a part of resilience.
Excellent. Thank you, Sajan. Samir.
Recovery for sure. At the end of the day, I can't keep up with the adversaries. At least I want to make sure that my critical data is and I can recover it and resume business.
Great. Ben?
I'm going to quote from the internet, because that's easy. And resilience includes the word recovery, ironically.
Correct.
The ability to prepare and plan for, absorb, and recover from, and more successfully adapt to adverse events after they occur.
Was.
So this would be a perfect question to ask ChatGPT, and unfortunately I didn't get the chance, so I'll have to make up a human response. But yeah, I would just concur with what was said, that it's impossible to prevent so much of what's going on right now, right? So you have to accept a certain amount of kind of low-level events. The really key thing is to have the mechanisms in place, people, process, technology in your company, so that like little problems don't turn into huge problems. That's really where the recovery is.
Neil?
So I'll be pretty adamant about this. Recovery is more important than prevention. DIE first, CIA second. And if my co-panelist here, Ben, would excuse me on this statement. So long live DIE, deft to CIA.
Great. Thank you very much. Let me just, yes, Samir.
I was going to say, Rami, thank you very much for the Cyber Week coordinators, Rami, you and your team hosting us. This has been an excellent experience for us, so thank you.
I want to thank you very much first. Thank you for your cooperation. I just want to remind you that in this panel we had Mr. Benjamin Stone from the FBI, he's the legal in Tel Aviv, Samir Sharif, Chief Information Security Officer at Absolute, Sajan Gautam from CISO of Avers Bank, and Boaz Gilbert, Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer of Akamai, Sunil Yu, CISO and Head of Research, Jupiter One, and I, after we spoke about recovery. So after 15 minutes of recovery, you will come back, I hope, again to listen to Minister Audrey Tang. It's the first time that we have a minister coming from Taiwan. And this is a very special angle to speak about it. We are going to speak with Shira Benkovsky, the VP Product of XM, founder of and CEO of Mazeball Technologies. Matthew Andriani is going to be with us. Greg Bernhardt, the Director of Cybersecurity Policy, Department of Public Safety in Canada. And Erez Tidhar is the Executive Director of the Israeli CERT. And Operation Defense in the INCD. Their panel name is going to be Building Cyber Resilience at the Organizational and National Level. I thank you very much for your questions. Thank you very much for being here with us. Waiting to see you again in 15 minutes. And thank you, Ronit, again. For those of you who didn't hear, I'm Rami Efrati. I'm the, usually I call myself the self-nominated Cyber Ambassador of Israel. The reason is because I'm going everywhere whenever I have my business. In every country, I speak on Israeli cyber and the miracle that really happened to us, how we took a small country, took the threat, and make it a business opportunity. So I have a question to you. How many of you are dealing with or are part of a startup? No one. You. No, I saw you before, from Risek, an amazing company. Wow, so I can only be proud and speak about one company. I have no you have no competitions, unless the guys are sitting here. And is one of the founding members of the Israeli Cyber Directorate and one of the starting people in Cybertech and Cyber Week. I'm very proud to have you all here today. This is going to be an amazing panel, not only because of the publicity, the panel members, but also because we are going to speak about building cyber resilience at the organizational and national level, and this is very, very important part. One thing I would like you to know, I would like very much that if you are having any question, please ask. Not in the Israeli way, please. I'll give time, so you will be able to do it while I'm talking, but If you cannot hold yourself, just say, I will make it happen. And we are very proud to have all the panelists here with us, some from the public, or let's say from the government side, and some of them from the business. And this is an amazing combination that we would like to do. We're all speaking about the PPP, public partnership and the government. Here we see it. But it's a special honor for all of us today to have Minister Audrey Tang from the beautiful Taiwan. He's the Minister of Digital Affairs in Taiwan. If you are still looking for a country to go with not so many tourists, this is the place. If you want to have the best food, not kosher, sorry, this is the place. And speaking about kosher, we have with us Shira Benkovsky. She is VP Product of XM, Kabbalat Panim Soeret. Matthew Andriani is the founder and CEO of Mazebold Technologies. Thank you, thank you. Wow, it's 5 o'clock and it's amazing. Greg Banghard, I hope I said your name correctly, sir. He's coming from the government side. He's the Director of Cybersecurity Policy, Department of Public Safety, Canada. Those who have been this morning to the plenary session, so also Samir Khoury, a great friend from Canada who is dealing with the Canadian Cyber Directorate. We have Erez Tidhar here with us. He's executive. Oh, the first time somebody is clapping for a government official. Listen, this cannot happen. Only in Israel.
To sit me away from you because we always fight. So
tell them the truth.
And I have to correct you. The best sunsets are in Beersheba. So sorry for Taiwan.
Beersheba. Yeah. Yes, that's the cyber capital. Although they said in the morning that Tel Aviv is the cyber capital. Why is saying it? Because the Israel National Cyber Directorate started to have their cert in Beersheba. So luckily, you have the chance, those of you who are going to be there, to go to Beersheba. If you're still looking for camels, see it in the movie. If you would like to see a place which is growing, this is the place. I'm not going now to speak about the Beersheba ecosystem. It's something amazing. And we have Eric Tech with us here. He will speak about himself. He's from Trend Micro. So we have people from Asia Pacific, from America, and also from Israel. Let's get them nicely, and let's start very quickly. I ask each one of you, we'll start with you, Erez. We give some pride to the Israelis as well sometime. Each one will say some words about him and what is his real role. And later I'll ask you some more questions. And remember, prepare your questions as well. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for attending. It's an honor to be here. I'm the Executive Director, Head of the National CERT and Operations from the Israel National Cyber Directorate. We actually manage all cyber events that are occurring in Israel and are thrown against Israel. It can be from any enemy or any adversary, and we're trying to do a very good job. It's a challenging and a tough job because citizens expect the government to protect them, but there is a limit what you can do. So very proud to be here and very proud of my job description.
Great. Let me tell you something of importance, especially for the Israelis, not about applause. Remember a number, 911. If you forget it, it's 119, but from another side. If you have a problem, if you face a problem, if you suspect something is happening to you or to any of your neighbors, call 911. You don't, what? 119, sorry. You see, I was so happy with the number. I suggest you to have it as well in Taiwan.
It's in Taiwan too. Yeah.
Really? Yes. You took our number as well?
Oh.
Okay, sir. This is the number that if you are going to call, hopefully you will answer, you will get an answer. Unless in Yom Kippur, I believe that you will get it also in Yom Kippur, no. Every day.
Every day.
And I can tell you that looking at the resilience on the national level, some of the attacks on Israel were identified by civilians who called 119 and reported about something that's happening. And suddenly we saw it all over. And as you know, Israel is one of the most attacked countries in the world. Eric, please.
Hi, my name is Eric Theck. I do make a habit of being late usually. I am with Trend Micro. I am the Director of Global Intelligence for Trend Micro as a service. Most of my background it deals with the U.S. government and U.S. military. We have various different roles. My role is shifting and changing as I am doing more collaboration and advocacy from a government perspective into Trend Micro. Mostly because that is my background, and I do enjoy building relationships with compatriots who have a like and similar attitude towards things. So that's me. If you want to know more,
Excellent.
Beer.
Greg, please.
Hey, thank you. My name is Greg Monhart from Canada, Department of Public Safety. I'm the National Cyber Director for Policy. Before starting in this role, I spent 20 years in the Royal Canadian Navy, rolled over into the civilian role, and I've been in this organization for about 6 years now. My team looks at Canada's national cybersecurity strategy. We run the cyber governance in Canada, and we do a lot of international outreach and coordination with our Foreign Affairs Ministry. I'll preface my engagement here by saying that I am not a ones and zeros person. Sammy Curry and the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, that's them. They do a brilliant job at it. I bring the policy aspect and that component to it. Thank you.
I have to update you, but it's a little bit sensitive. But you need to have intelligence. The new Israeli ambassador to Canada was the head of the cyber in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So he knows what he's talking. And he's looking forward to meet you all. Shira, please.
I'm going to do the same trial as you did without the microphone, and we'll see if that works. I think it does. Hi, my name is Shira Dmitkovsky. I'm from XM Cyber. We specialize in attack path modeling in hybrid environment and cloud.
They don't hear you.
Oh, they don't hear me? I think this is the reason why you haven't. But I saw you and it looked okay. Okay.
They are recording everything, so.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Shira Bendikovsky. I'm from XM Cyber. We specialize in attack path modeling. We're an Israeli vendor. Today, also partially European company. In hybrid environments, both cloud and on-prem. I come from a background of civil service, seeing both sides of attackers, defense, and how they combine together. And that's part of the reason why I really love being the VP product of XM Cyber, because I get to see how these two converge into getting better security for our customers. Yeah.
Andriani.
Hi, my name is Matthew Andriani. I'm the CEO of MazeBuild. We specialize in avoiding DDoS attacks. I've been in the DDoS industry now for about 12 years. I was in RAD, where I set up a research team that we work a lot with the government too. We work a lot with the private sector, with banks, stock exchanges, large e-commerce sites. Essentially, what we managed to do is create a patented technology that's able to identify vulnerabilities that's protecting critical infrastructure and eliminate those vulnerabilities before they're attacked. We've been doing that now for the past 2 years, and we've had great success. It's nice to see. We take protection of very high security environments that was not where it should have been, and we make it close to, not impenetrable, but close to, and we're having a good time doing that.
Excellent. Minister Tang, please.
Sure. So I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. I raised my hand when asked a startup because we're still a startup. We started last August, and our mandate, incidentally, is digital resilience for all. And in the ministry, we basically just look at all the units in our cabinet that worked closely during the 3 years of pandemic, and we look at what the Ukrainians did during the Russia-Ukraine war, and then we basically said, okay, so we need this unit that manages spectrum, satellites, this unit that manages data, digital service, that unit that manages AI, cybersecurity, and whatever, and then boom, into a new ministry. So we are a experiment in integrated circuit in the national cabinet. Thank you.
That's great, but please remember, Minister, Startup Nation is our logo. We cannot just take it.
But it's called Startup Island.
Okay, so it's okay, no, but remember you cannot take, although you are in...
You're not calling yourself an island.
Not yet, not yet.
Okay,
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Okay, let's go to business. I wanted to start with the minister, but I like to ask you, Erez, and you didn't prepare for it. Can you tell us what is the main role of a national CERT and of the annex coming next to it is very important when we are speaking about resilience.
So first of all, you mentioned it correctly. The national CERT is supposed to take care of all cyber attacks launched at Israel. I think our specialty is that we're actually the first nation in the world to issue a hotline, 119, to enable citizens to call actually the Prime Minister's office and report a cyber event. Now, the amount of events we handled in 2022 was more than 20,000 calls to that center, and from those 20,000 calls, were born more than 10,000 cyber events. When I say cyber event, it's not scans over the net. It's actually a hold of some adversary in some computer network, and we're able to assist actually the civilian market. Now, when you take that, that is one role. The other role is awareness, and I'm going to talk about that a lot. At the end of the day, most countries can defend very good their critical infrastructures and their essential services, and we do it, I want to believe, pretty good. But when it comes to the men on the street, awareness is something that is lacking in most countries. We are doing a great effort to bring awareness to the people, to their houses. If someone can know or will manage to protect his own home router, I believe it will do good cyber defense when it goes to work, and then that will affect all the pyramid. So it's a reverse pyramid. We're starting with the population, and then we're going down to our critical infrastructure. So I think our main role is to bring awareness and safer cyber zone to everyone.
And you are the one who is answering all the 20,000 calls?
I answered 19,000, and I like my team. So actually, there's a very big team, 24/7, and Yom Kippur especially because they receive 300% salary, so they like it. But actually, 24/7. The amazing thing is that those guys are a junior analyst, and they see themselves in a patriotic act working for the government because they could win double and triple salary in any other high-tech company right next door, but they choose to come to work for the government, and that is something that is has no price. So big team and big applause for those teams. Yeah, it's recorded. I have to do it. They work for me.
For those of you who don't know about the Israeli National Cyber Bureau, changed to be Directorate, just to let you know, they are responsible for the civilian market. It's very important to understand it because according to Israeli rules and laws, we have the special organizations like the Mossad, like the Israeli Shin Bet, like the military police. They are responsible for themselves. But what happened is that we coordinate all the work together. And the most important thing, I believe, is that the National Cyber Directorate was the one to push and take the threat to make it a business opportunity. And we had a special way, I'm going to speak with you about it in Taiwan, how to support Israeli startups in order to become well known in the world. And what is the first question that anybody is asking if he's overseas and a young Israeli company is coming to him? Are you already installed in Israel? So we also started to have test beds with their names so they will be able to tell the truth. Although in the Middle East it's not so common. Minister Tang, let me please ask you, the Ministry of Digital Affairs, MODA, if I may say, is established last year. We would like to, if you can, share with us the major missions of MODA.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. In the plenary, I've already talked about one of our missions, which is defending against the FIMI and DDoS attacks. And in addition to that, we're also in charge of the digital services in Taiwan. For example, last year, because TSMC paid a lot of tax, we have a surplus in our treasury. So we decided to give every citizen in Taiwan 23 million. 6,000 NT dollars, just as a thank you, right? But how to get all 23 million people? Some of them have a bank account, some not. Some of them prefer post office, some not, and so on, without any scam, any mix-up, and things like that. So we integrated the healthcare services, post office services, and so on into this shared platform for cash delivery. So this is actually something that we do. And we also take care of the physical layer as well. Earlier this year, when there was a fishing vessel and a cargo vessel, both flying the PRC flag, accidentally destroyed the submarine cables connecting Taiwan and Matsu Island. We were the one to not just to work on the microwave backup, but also work with satellite companies and so on to deliver emergency communication. So it's both societal resilience via universal services, broadband as a human right, and also taking care of that infrastructure and build digital applications on top of it.
You're also dealing with privacy, or privacy is totally separated?
Have a independent data protection officer. That will probably be next year. So we are the prototype, the incubator.
I see.
But at some point, there will be an independent commission. But we work as the technical infrastructure for example, zero knowledge, privacy enhancing technologies, and so on, to prepare for that National Commission for Privacy Protection.
Great, thank you very much. Matthew, how do all of these high-profile attacks succeed? How do you build resilience for DDoS attacks?
That's a good question. Thank you. First of all, Audrey, if you're in charge of DDoS, you're missing a critical component. I can guarantee you that. You need to come speak with us.
No, Matthew, just to let you know, when we had a meeting with Minister Tang, one of the most highlight part was DDoS.
It's something that's troubling all the governments and the infrastructure for a good reason. I think you've seen the damage a DDoS attack can do. How do you build resilience? I think one of the big problems in the DDoS market in general is the DDoS attack comes out of nowhere. You thought you had all the protection deployed, you thought everything's going to work. It's pretty much a black box technology. And then you find yourself in a damaging downtime scenario where you have a response to the DDoS attack. And that's exactly the point that we go to. We find you cannot have a DDoS attack today without a vulnerability in the DDoS protection that you've deployed. It's just not possible. So we're the only company around today that actually developed a way to find the vulnerabilities in all of the protection layers that you've got in DDoS, which is actually the only known method to prevent the attack penetrating through all of the environment before having to respond to it. Because otherwise, the only time you know you've got a vulnerability in that protection is when you've got damage in the country or on infrastructure, a bank, whatever it is. So our approach to resilience is you've got good DDoS protection. However, it works at around 60% effectiveness. The way to get that other 40% is identify and remediate, close those vulnerabilities in the protection continuously, and you can put a very, very tough wall of defenses up to prevent a damaging attack.
I see. Great. Please prepare your questions. I believe that you will have a lot of questions. One of the most, I spoke about it before, one of the most well-known attacks which is published in Israel once a year under the name of Ops Israel, exactly on April 7, is a huge DDoS attack that we are facing. And it is still going on, and it's something which is very good for Israel because nobody tells us about it. We just have to collect the intelligence to make sure that we are ready, to be well prepared, and to mitigate it as quickly as we can so they will move to another country to attack it as well. Which brings me now to Shira. XM Cyber. Have cyber resiliency concept changed as a result of organizations shifting to cloud infrastructure?
So I think there's a lot of different aspects to that question, but maybe if we're looking at two different aspects, the first one would be the operational continuity. And I think that's actually good news in terms of cyber resilience, the move to the cloud, because cloud infrastructure is more stable. It's giving opportunities of services for backups, dispersing all your resources in a different way, better recovery. So I think in terms of that part of cyber resiliency, the recover part, I think moving to the cloud is actually good news and not bad news. The way I see it is a little bit, it used to be on-prem, it's you versus the attacker in your on-prem data center. And when you move to the cloud, it's you versus the attacker, and you're backed up by providers, the biggest tech companies in the world. So, I'd like to be backed up by the biggest tech companies in the world. I think that's good news. There's the flip side of it as well, of the fact that you're in the internet, and there's no way, to overcome that. So if we're looking at, let's say, a NIST definition for cyber resiliency of withstanding and, starting with anticipating, withstanding, recovering, and adapting from a cyber attack, I think the part of anticipating has become very difficult in the cloud because it's true, it's hard to go, forcefully in your cloud environment, but if you compromise an identity or just someone by mistake configures one virtual machine in a wrong way, you're in your data center or very close to the data center because you're in the cloud. So it's not a long travel. We performed a research on all the data that we have from our customers, which was a lot of data and a lot of attack paths. And we really saw the different attack paths, the differences between cloud attack paths and attack paths in the on-prem. It's very clear. We knew this before, but still, it's good to see the proof for the data that in cloud, the attack paths are much, much shorter than in on-prem. You have a lot of high privileged identities. It's mainly or primarily a development area. So I think it's still with that mindset. So everyone's like some sort of an admin. You're not even aware of it. So after taking the first step, it's pretty easy for an attacker to get to your sensitive information. Only, it's in their reach. I think in that way, we have to rethink the whole cyber resiliency and anticipation. What does it even mean? And how can I withstand an attack if, an attacker is so close to sensitive information?
Just a business question. And you're dealing both with on-prem and cloud in your solutions?
We look and we calculate attack paths from on-prem to cloud and vice versa. We look at the whole environment as a whole because we think that they're interlinked. There's no real difference. It's only us looking on the defense side as if they're different environments, but attacker, they're looking for their targets and the target could be either there or, the other side. Wherever they landed, they're going to move from there. And our goal is to help disrupt attack paths and prevent one of the.
I was asking it because the trend that I see in government is to have on-prem and not going to the cloud because many of them don't really believe on this. For those of you who are interested in tomorrow's panels, we are having a special critical infrastructure, which is split into 3 parts. The third part that will be handled by the Israeli National Cyber Directorate is speaking how we're going to bring controllers to the cloud, which is, of course, going to happen soon. I would like quickly to go to Greg, please. Is it okay that I call you Greg? Okay, great. What are some key initiatives you are working on to build cyber resilience at the national and organization level, please?
Thanks for the question, Rami. So in Canada right now, we have several initiatives underway. 2 of the largest ones, we are renewing our national cybersecurity strategy. Our last cyber strategy was released in 2018. It was meant to be an enduring strategy that was going to guide Canada well into the digital age. Unfortunately, like many of the best laid plans, it didn't survive contact with the enemy. COVID happened. That fundamentally changed the way in which Canadians live, work, and play online. Canada was already a very connected nation. COVID forced us online almost exclusively. Canada has very remote regions, and even those regions now are connected. So that really accelerated the time frame that we had for our 2018 strategy. The other thing that changed the calculus for many Canadians was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Before that happened, we had CI, critical infrastructure owners and operators, who were aware of a threat, who knew that cyber was important, but the threat wasn't real to them. After Russia invaded Ukraine, we started getting calls, many calls, asking and demanding that the government sit down with CI owners and operators and talk about what was going on, what was the threat, what was going to happen, how could they protect themselves. And our Cyber Center had been putting out advisories and alerts and best practices for years. That stuff was out there, but I don't think the threat had actually been internalized. So those 2 things really forced us to realize that it was time to renew our strategy. So we're well in the process of that right now. We've been conducting engagements with industry, with provinces, territories, and Canadians to find out what the next strategy should look like. And we're in the process of finalizing that. We'll be presenting that to Canada's cabinet in the coming months and then hopefully releasing a public-facing strategy sometime later in the fall or early in the new year. That's one major thing that we're doing to increase resilience. And then the second one we're doing is increasing new legislation in Canada. It's called Bill C-26, an Act Respecting Cybersecurity. That bill has 2 components. The first part is adding security as a policy objective to our Telecommunications Act. That will allow us to, through statute, ban high-risk suppliers who pose a risk to our telecommunications system. 2 of our ministers last year made a comment that the intention would be to use this provision to ban Huawei and ZTE from Canada's telecommunications system. The second part of the bill, and with probably more ramifications, is the Critical Cyber Systems Protection Act. That act is going to require cybersecurity baselines across 4 federally regulated sectors in Canada: transportation, telecommunication, finance, and energy. What that means is that those sectors will have regulations that will require them to have cybersecurity plans, that will require mandatory reporting of cybersecurity incidents, and is really going to raise the baseline of those sectors across Canada. Why didn't we do every CI sector? Well, Canada is a federation, and the federal government doesn't actually have the ability to direct in some sectors, such as healthcare, which is a provincial responsibility. Our hope is that this legislation will serve as a model for the jurisdictions then to impose the similar legislation to ensure that that minimum baseline is met. Well, those are two high-level ones very quickly. Happy to answer questions on those later. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Greg. Before going to Eric from Trend Micro, please prepare your questions because after you're going to sing, yes? Because you're the last. After, and dance on the table. So Erez, after Erez will speak, I'm going to give you the time to ask questions. If not, we will go on. And take another advantage of being here today. We have amazing panelists. You don't find them every day. You don't meet with them every day. Take the time after we finish, talk to them. It's very, very important, and I believe they are ready to do it as well. And then after so many words, I'm going to Mr. Eric Tech. Eric, from the government level, why do you think we are seeing a huge increase in regards to compliancy regulations?
Thank you, Rami. That is a couple things actually that leads to this that have kind of been spoken by the panel here already. That the attack scene in Taiwan from a DDoS perspective, the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and actually you're looking at the colonial pipeline. Generally across the board, what you're seeing is, as an industry, or as more along the line of owners of networks, is a general failure at securing the networks to what is perceived high-risk areas by the government. And you also have to take a look at it from the perspective of the government. Back in 2014, you had the first invasion of Ukraine by Russia, to such a degree that what you had was asymmetrical warfare finally executed. That's the combination of kinetic effects with digital effects. And you saw the damage there where infrastructure was shut down, things happened that could only happen because of a digital attack. This was a wake-up call. This was the point where NATO identified, so the North Atlantic Treaty Organization identified cyber as a domain. And this is also really weird because traditionally, from military perspective, air, land, sea, and space is a combat domain. This is where things happen. Now we have this domain, which is entirely man-made. Everyone in this room is dependent upon this man-made environment, woman-made, person-made, that is nebulous at best. And here you now have a combat domain where governments are moving and perceive the danger possibly more rapidly than the people that are occupying. And now we're having a challenge as the globe. How do we defend that? How do we define resilience? What is resilience and what's the impact to our way of life? The compliancy regulations come out everywhere. Greg's talked about it. Iwan's talked about it. It's just Biden executives, NIST 2, NIST 1, the failure of NIST 1, now is NIST 2. We are not, the fear really comes down to is we're looking at the fire sale from a movie. And that is this mythical idea where the world gets shut down. And you see the failure of that to actually materialize in the Russian war. I'm not really sure how impactful it will be. The governments are extremely nervous about it, and they're trying to prepare the population and how to prepare critical infrastructure. That is a way we live. How can you order food if your food's not there? How can you order all that great stuff from Amazon when everyone's suddenly home and they can't deliver because logistics not possible? From a digital perspective, not talking about the ships waiting for the offload. So that is some of the key elements that we see from a governmental perspective on why this push. We're seeing some crazy stuff coming out of Europe, with the Cyber Resiliency Act,
Correct.
with the AI Act. And everything about this is pointing to the fact that as a globe, how ready are we? The future is here. Reality is here. Battle up. The ride.
And you spoke about Amazon and what is the resilience that we as citizens are having if somebody is going just to send a ransomware malware to Amazon. I said, listen, in 5 minutes, you don't pay us 20,000 Bitcoins, all your fleet is going to be down, and suddenly it's falling something on your head. And this is one of a crucial scenarios that can happen. Erez, one of the most, let's go to the Israelis again. One of a very important part of the resilience is awareness. Awareness is a culture. I'll tell you a real story, but you have to take it as it is. Once a week, I'm going to make my haircut. I need it, as you can see. I come to my...
Me too, by the way, once a week.
Yes, it's not the same one, because I tell you what mine is doing, you will be very happy about it. The guy that I'm coming usually asks me, Rami, what today? I say, what today? Make me blonde and curly. What can I tell him? But okay, I cannot do anything. And then he gets a phone call. He gets a phone call from his wife, Tzipi, talking to her while he's a Moroccan guy with a knife. It's not so simple for me, sitting there on the chair. And suddenly the phone stops. He looks at me, he knows that I'm dealing with cyber. I say, you see, Rami? These are the small cyber guys in my phone. He doesn't understand anything about cyber, but he understands about resilience, that something can happen. And I think this was one of the most amazing jobs done by the National Cyber Directorate. And therefore, since we are seeing a lot of growing attacks in the space, what are the basic recommendations that you as the National Directorate and the CERT should do, and how do you approach the simple citizen who doesn't know anything about cyber?
So the amazing thing is that we made a statistic last year, or at the end of last year, and we saw that about 75% of all attacks over Israeli cyberspace were conducted by a one-day vulnerability. That means, for the ones who do not speak cyber language, a disease that already has a cure. Now that doesn't make sense, because if there is a cure for COVID-19 vaccination, there is no reason to get it. So if there is a cure for any unpatched system, as you said, why not patch it up? So actually 75% of the attacks were not issued by some genius hacker who manufactured the new zero-day. So your question is bonsai, because if you do simple stuff like update your system, do a complexity password, do multi-factor authentication, don't give your password to anyone, don't click on any link. Those are like the 5 finger rules for kids. And if you do that, you will probably prevent the attack on your network. Now that's amazing, because we do not ask the population to do something complex. We do not ask them to be computer engineers or hackers or to know how to write your code in Python. No, just do the simple stuff. And the hacker, look, I'll tell you a secret, please let's keep this here, okay? Hackers are lazy. No offense for hackers. Okay? Why? Because in the previous days, to be a hacker, you actually had to learn computer science and to write a code and how to implement it and how to run it and how to compile it and how to send it and so on and so forth. Today, to be a hacker, you have to have internet connection, Google in the worst case, and just download whatever you want. How to hack iPhone 14, and you'll get the manual. You even get a movie for those who don't know how to read. And most hackers don't. Oh, I love hackers. Yeah, they provide a job. So hackers are lazy. Now, if I will take you to the physical world, and I will tell you, look, if you're going down the street and you see a castle with walls and fences and guards and snipers and lightning and alligators in the tunnel, and beside that you see a house which has no windows or no bars, and it's all dark, and the door is open, and someone left a note, the key is under the mattress, I'll probably go and start, will be the burglar in that house. Exactly like that. Hackers do not want to face strongholds and don't want to face someone who knows what they're doing, so they'll go to the next SMB or to the next enterprise. So do the simple stuff. It's not rocket science. And I believe you'll be safer.
I agree with you, and I believe that when we are talking about the private person, okay, my wife tells me there is a new version of iPhone, do it, that's fine. But when you are speaking about Microsoft and others, if I have to do it in my computer, it is fine. But if you're a business, it will take you much longer. I believe that you know it, and we have also to see how can we do it. Sometimes it can take months.
But if you are a business, you will have the team that is qualified to do that and will understand it. And now, if you hire a team that does not know that it has to do patches on time, your team is the wrong one.
We cannot hire them. No, they are working for you. We cannot hire them. But anyhow, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to ask some questions. If you have prepared, if not, we will go on, no problem. Any questions from the audience? Yeah, just a second. We'll give you a mic because otherwise.
I was just scared that Eric said that Amazon packages won't arrive. No, please. I agree with anything, but kill Amazon. My package
please, this gentleman, sir, please present yourself as well.
Hi, my name is Ben Mandela. I'm from Kenya. I have a question for Erez. And my question is, we also as a country are in the process of setting up an NSAT that's modeled around what Israel has. My question to you is, I mean, from the solar wind attack, we saw the importance of basically not separating, say, between the military and maybe the civilian, because, I mean, this attack went right through all these sectors. And so you've mentioned that you guys focus on the civilian bit of the CERT. So, I mean, how helpful is it? I mean, just bearing in mind that whole thing with the solar wind issue. Thank you.
So I'll make it brief. It's not that the INCD focuses only on the civilian market. Actually, we divided Israel into a 3-layer pyramid. On the top of the pyramid is our critical infrastructures, which are under us by law. Not only they're under us by law, we have a special methodology, a tailor-written methodology for each and one of those infrastructures. And apart from that, I have a whole division called the guidance division, which each of my guys is stationed in those critical infrastructures and knows their system, their CEO, up until their manufacturing level. So those are our diamonds, and we protect them very well, and we differentiate it a lot from the other. On the second layer are the essential services, and those are about 500 entities in Israel, including all the hospitals, all the hosting companies, all the energy companies, which is not the electric company of Israel. In this case, we are actually the regulator of the regulators. We help the government offices to do the regulation. I very much agree when there is a strong regulator, he's doing a good job, but when he's a weak regulator, you said that in your nation is the healthcare is weak. So in Israel, there are other regulators which are not strong in cybersecurity. So right now, we're going to pass a bill that will enable us, give power to those regulators to do good cyber defense. And at the third layer, which is the biggest one, is the civilian market. And in this case, we actually try to do the best to raise the robustness and the resilience in every system, small, medium businesses. So it's not that we're putting all our eggs in one basket. We actually divided Israel, and there's a different, of course, focus on critical infrastructures, and on the main street, it's very different. So we try to manage it in a different way. But don't worry, Israel is safe. I hope.
No, this is your job. So I hope that you know.
Because I know what would happen. I would wake up tomorrow morning and someone would attack your electric system, and that's it. I will come work for General Brigadier Rami. And I don't want to.
Asante sana, sir. Anyone else would like to comment to him about it? No. Okay. Another question, please. Yes, please. Please present yourself.
Can you hear me? Okay. Hi. My name is Avishai, and I've been I've been working in the data and AI landscape for about 2 decades now. And up until now, it was, there was a cookbook, right? If you wanted to implement AI, if you want to build a data-driven organization, you'd follow a cookbook. I had procedures that I took in order to make sure that any organization I worked for can apply data and can be safe about it. But now there's a new kid in the block, right? There's GPT and LLMs that are kind of showing up, and this is actually more of a product revolution rather than a technological revolution, right? Because LLMs have been around for several years now, but it just kind of broke through with ChatGPT. But the thing is, McKinsey just published a report that about 70% of the entire opportunities in that landscape would be in customer service and generating code, right? And that means it exposes us to totally different vulnerabilities, ones that we may have not even seen before, right? Ones that we are not even aware of. For instance, back a few years ago, it was about SQL injection. Now it may be prompt injection, right? So when I put something into production and a large language model, I don't know how the users will interact with it and what kind of adversity will they exploit, right? For instance, as
Ishai, sorry, what is the question?
So the question is, you mentioned, Eric, also, you touched base on the question on what is resilience, right? How do you define resilience? So I guess this is a question for both the ones that represent countries and those that represent commercial organizations. Do you take that into consideration, both in terms of researching and devoting resources to kind of define and research how does resilience look like in this new area of large language models? And
thank you. Minister Tang, would you like to?
Yeah, before I joined the cabinet, I was with the Apple Siri team for 6 years. So language models is kind of my hobby. So I'll answer the question from two vantage points. One is, indeed, there are new surfaces when it comes to injection attacks. It's not even injection. There could be, for example, people observe that ChatGPT, when you ask it to write Node.js JavaScript programs, it suggests some NPM modules that are not there. And then you can do a domain squatting. You can publish that NPM module that it hallucinates. And then it lets you get into the supply chain of the Node.js modules and so on. And I think the root of this problem is because that we do not yet have a reliable way to fine-tune the largest Anthropic and OpenAI models according to our organizational setting. I mean, you can do some of that in Azure and GPT-3, but not in GPT-4 at the moment. So the Taiwan model, as we call it, is that we work on the open source models like OpenLlama and so on, and then we train our own models using our own chips, but release them as open source. It learns from GPT-4 or whatever to distill its knowledge, but at the end of the day, we set up a national AI audit center to put it under the kind of testing that you just mentioned that are important, and only after it earns this score in the benchmark do we actually release it to our general public and our small and medium enterprises for translation, for summarization, and things like that. So the idea is that instead of one general AI, one monoculture to serve all the needs, we recontextualize it like into narrow AI. It's like crowdsourcing a curriculum for specialty programs in high schools and so on. So while it's the same base model as the same kindergarten, they need to refocus and respecialize whenever we put it intended to use. So this is one angle. And the other angle is that we look forward to, like, I compose my emails using language models trained on my MacBook, and my emails never leave the MacBook for training. And so this kind of edge inference, edge AI training, I think is very important because it empowers everyone to bring them into the savviness of understanding the bias and so on, instead of just blindly following the monoculture. So the democratization of capabilities, although kind of scary, is important for awareness and for competence building. But a national auditing and a national open source model, we think is also very important.
Thank you very much, Minister Tang. We are going back to the panel. You can have, you're having enough time to prepare more questions for the end. And I would like to go now to Shira again from XM. Your company is in the prevention realm, trying to drive security improvements in the customer's environment in order to make the attacker's job much harder. What I would like to ask you, do you think that organizations should invest in resilience, or is it realistic to expect that we prevent the attacks?
Okay, so I think it would be crazy to say that we could prevent all attacks, right? We're a firm believer of assume breach. The attack landscape has broadened so much, and it's continuing to broaden with, APIs and development going on, special campaigns, really social engineering that's a lot more sophisticated than it was. You were saying before, Erez, that attackers are lazy. I have to say, and not just on a personal level, I beg to differ a little bit. I think attackers used to be a lot more lazy. I think today it's more of a financial driven market. And now I'm looking at organizations and not nation state. Yeah. And since there's a lot of money on the table, these are businessmen and entrepreneurs that are not looking at it anymore as a technological problem. They're looking at it as an operation. And when you're looking at operation, then you're swapping and you're using whatever you can. So I think we have to assume breach. So full prevention cannot be done. I think the interesting question is, after attackers in your environment, are you more invested in, well, maybe in the narrow form of resilience in terms of bouncing back, and having your backups ready and your network up and running, or in prevention? And what do I mean? Sensitive data, in the end, is not just a question of technological aspect. It's a lot about what your business is doing and what would be the impact of the business. So I think if we're looking at an attacker gaining sensitive data, publishing it today with public awareness, data privacy, all very, very good concepts, we're getting to the point where there's a business impact that might not relate at all to technological impact. Like, you can bounce back, you would have your backups, everything will be okay, but still your company is ruined. So when I'm looking at it in an organization perspective, I think it's super crucial to understand what your sensitive data is, and that varies from different companies. We're thinking about it in the same terms. We're constantly saying PII, but the truth is, it really changes in terms of what you do to know what the sensitive data is, and I think that's very important. And then I think, well, since I come also from a company that's what we do, but I think it really is important to see how we can make it much harder for an attacker to get to that sensitive information. Yes, they'll get into the environment, and then they might be a little bit lazy. And I think we had a little peek of that in December 2020. I'm looking at you with Black Shadow, an Iranian group that attacked a web hosting service in Israel. And they compromised a lot of different websites, two out of them being, one was a bus transportation company, and the other one was a dating app for the gay community. What a difference. They published the same information, basically. One, the bus transportation was, passengers going up.
Please be shorter, otherwise I will not have the chance.
And down the buses, and the other one was people that just signed up to the service. And you could see the backlash, and what that dating app suffered as a business was no comparison. This is very important, I think, as a CISO, to take a look and see your own organization and what really would be sensitive.
Thank you. I would like to give an opportunity that everybody will speak. Erez, you laugh too much. Let me tell you something. I just got a message. I just got a message from the Israeli CERT asking all the Israelis, don't call 119. They got about 100 calls since we started to talk to make sure that they're answering, so please stop it. Anyhow, let's go to Maisbolt immediately. Matthew, you spoke about DDoS vulnerabilities. Maybe you can explain us what is a DDoS vulnerability?
That's a good question. The concept of a vulnerability in general, typically everyone knows about a CVE, that you have a problem in a piece of software, someone takes advantage of that software with an exploit and gets into the environment. You talk about one-day vulnerabilities. DDoS vulnerabilities essentially are hundreds of days, if not years. And what a DDoS vulnerability typically is you have misconfigurations in your protections that leads to vulnerabilities in those protections that eventually leads to a damaging DDoS attack. So your vulnerability in DDoS, no DDoS attack can succeed without vulnerable protection. If you've got Akamai or Radware or Imperva, it doesn't really matter who you've got. You don't have a software developer to run back to, or Amazon Advanced Shield, you don't have a software developer to run back to. The only vendor you can go to is the DDoS protection vendor itself. So a DDoS vulnerability is actually the vulnerability within your DDoS protections, in your layers of DDoS protection. And there are many layers of DDoS protection. So you've got layers that are closer to the internet, layers that are closer to kind of the source of your assets, whether it's in the cloud or in a traditional. We were talking about resilience and Amazon. I mean, these are the kind of services that get knocked over. I think everything I've heard here today, DDoS is everything I hear through a DDoS lens, because that's what we do. But everything in terms of cessation of business continuity, this is what happened in Georgia, first in Georgia. That was a major, touchwood, in Israel, even in Op Israel. As far as I'm concerned, these are relatively small attacks, even though but we haven't faced a really vicious attack that someone has, well, okay, we may have, but we have.
Not alone, so we'll discuss it later.
Okay, but we haven't seen any catastrophic failure, let's put it.
Correct.
Whereas Georgia felt that also in Ukraine with this Icarus attack, where they actually found out how to send DDoS attack traffic through Starlink satellite that knocked out the satellites, which essentially knocks out communications. So I think this whole resiliency issue is all rooted in DDoS. And actually there is now a solution to reduce that problem by hundreds of %. So when you ask what a DDoS vulnerability is, it's the vulnerability in the DDoS protection itself, the various layers.
Many people that I'm trying to help them in deciding which new area they are going to deal is asking me, should we still deal with DDoS? And the answer is yes. It is still existing, it is growing. The attacks on Israel, on every Ops Israel, is growing dramatically with new servers and with a much higher capacity in order to do it, so it is fine. Let's go back to Mr. Bangerhard and speak about the government. We need to show that the government is strong. What do you see as the greatest challenge in raising the national cybersecurity bar from the perspective of your organization?
I think buy-in is part of it. You need to convince people that cybersecurity is an issue. For small and medium enterprises, part of it is cost. I think there needs to be an examination of how can we incentivize better cybersecurity practices. Does that mean tax breaks? Does that mean some sort of funding for businesses to take certain precautions? That's certainly one part of it. We're looking at a very competitive global environment. What can you do as a government to help develop startup companies? Israel's a beautiful example of this. Like, you've done a fantastic job. Canada looks to Israel to find out what we can emulate to build the same sort of capacity within Canada. So that's one aspect. We've skirted around the idea of education and building knowledge level within the citizens. And for Canada, that becomes particularly challenging when you look at our geography is immense, right? From coast to coast to coast, our population is very different on the East Coast as it is from the West Coast to the northern coast of Canada. So what we're hearing and what we're learning is that you can't just go out there and say, cybersecurity is important, do these 6 things. What we're learning is that your message needs to be tailored for the audience that you're reaching. So what I tell to someone on the East Coast is going to be very different to the West Coast. The end result is the same, but the messaging is going to be different. And that becomes particularly important when we're talking about small businesses that are going to depend on cybersecurity. How do we make sure that they're internalizing the message, which is the right message, so they can apply it and raise that cybersecurity bar? I think we kind of talked about the fact that you can have the castle with the moat and the alligators, or you can have the house that's made of nothing. But maybe part of it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe if we can raise some companies up in Canada, that they're not the house of nothing. It may not be the castle, because that castle is going to be critical infrastructure. But we get them up a little bit, they'll be harder targets and more resilient.
As a matter of fact, we don't have the time to discuss it now. There is a big question. What is the role of the government? And in Israel, there was something amazing that was done. And this is that the government of the State of Israel, headed by the Prime Minister, decided that Israel will allocate a huge amount of money, that's why I can have so many people, in order to make the country one of the most, let's say, resilient countries and defended countries from cyber. And this is smart. Better to take this money now and be prepared than paying ransomware later. And I think this was one of them. The second was that in Israel, the case is that the cyber directorate is working under a direct, let's call it, command of the Prime Minister. This is a message to, first of all, to the government ministries. You are not going to work together, you are not going to get your budget. And also, I'm looking at you. It's very important. I'm not going to get more who is going with intelligence, etc., etc. I would like to go immediately to Mr. Eric Tech and ask you, in view of the increase of digital resiliency or security legislation, how do organization enter the resiliency path? What do you think about it?
Thank you, Ron. So my view on this is sometimes simplistic. It's also, I feel, possibly the best way. When you're faced with all of the legislation that's out, various feeling global companies that have multiple legislation that are going to restrict or guide you towards how this path begins. Ultimately, there's the buzzword that goes out, attack surface, which is a big term, but that really means understanding what you own. What is your footprint inside of your environment? How does that look? It's byte, ports, servers, protocols, connection, cloud, not cloud. Because when you're looking at this from an hacker perspective, this is where my thoughts are. Attack surface risk management is nothing more than a targeting profile of the organization. What is a criminal, state actor, non-affiliated actor going to look at your environment? Say, good victim, or victim. Because they're going to know your environment outside really well. To the point where they're going to say, I like this system profile that this organization has. I like the amount of money they make. And going over to LinkedIn and doing the profiles, so identifying where my attack path develop and crack is publicly available. So from that point, as an organization, that is where you start. Because at that point, when you say, this is my surface, you're beginning to understand the base where it's going to find. Because until you can actually find, you won't be able to solve that. And if you're facing the giant mound of legislation, that might be. Because once you go down the path, but it now can actually start identifying. What do I actually establish?
Yes, I would have add one word, and prioritize them.
Yes, exactly so.
The minute you prioritize it, you even understand, how am I going to invest in this?
Right.
Then going back to Minister Tang, don't worry, Erez, I will come back to you. You're dealing also with the communication. And usually what we are talking today, 5G. But everybody who is in this business is looking already to 6G, which is coming also from China, by the way. So communication network resilience, heterogeneous network concept and future SG, how do you look? 6G, how do you look?
So in my starting remarks, I mentioned the 2 subsea cables being cut earlier this year. That was really a wake-up call because in the island of Matsu, without those 2 subsea cables, the only recourse they could use at that point is geosynchronous satellites, which is very small bandwidth. And so we need to look at it at an all-hands-on-deck approach, not just that we're working with satellite companies in mid-Earth orbit like SES and low Earth orbit. We need to spread that signal to not just a few hotspots, but through 5G O-RAN to spread it to the people with a normal phone without the Wi-Fi distance limit. You can just serve the entire area. So this is something that we have done in Hsinchu, part of Taiwan, in which that it's not even suitcase mounted, but back at the time it was mounted on cars so that it can receive from multiple satellites and share as a 5G O-RAN 5G network to people nearby. And now this year, as part of the drills, we're going to set up 700 of those fixed and mobile satellite receiver that doubles as 5G hotspots, and then work on what we call the disaster roaming, so that whichever SIM card you hold, whichever of the 3 telecoms you hold, we will be able to switch the channels in the case of emergency, so that it will just reconnect you to whatever that's remaining of the communication network. So that's the basic ideas. The idea is that we always work with a plurality of vendors and always plan on not just plan B, but also plan C and plan D, and they need to interoperate with open protocols.
One of the messages that we have by having Minister Tang with us in Taiwan is that Taiwan is one of the first country to get to receive an attack, huge attacks from China. And that's, if you heard it well in the morning, everybody is speaking about a trust and about international coordination. We're speaking about the speed of light. So if we are going to get a message quickly to the CERT, they will be able, hopefully, to prepare the remedy as quickly as possible and update also the other countries. And this is going to be a big strength. And Erez, now to you. The Israeli National Directorate is also, in some occasions, develop its own tools. And I would like to ask you, what are you doing in the national level, speaking about tools, solutions, and the system in order to prevent huge attacks on Israel? And this is relevant for every citizen, because if you will do it the right way, you can still work and the line will not be cut.
Well, connected to another question where you ask what is the role of the government in protecting the cyber space. So I actually wrote down a few things that the INCD as a government does on a national level. So first of all, we do vulnerability scanning on a daily basis. We actually scan all Israel cyberspace 24/7, looking for unpatched system, everything, of course, in the exterior outlet from the organization and out to the net. No, you're saying yes, but people will say, they're penetrating my system, so no.
No, there is not a privacy issue, you mean?
We actually are managing to call thousands of organizations every day and telling them, look, you have an unpatched system. That's a service as a nation we do to, it can be a small, medium business. We're doing a PDNS, a protective DNS project right now, where today the General Director, Mr. Portnoy, said about the crystal ball, which is we're developing right now a platform that we can share IOCs and actually let investigators or cyber IR teams work together from different parts of the world over same case. We're doing the Cyber Dome, which is equivalent to the Iron Dome, okay, a multi-layer protection against missile. We're doing exactly the same in cyber. It's a multi-layer protection. It's a huge information factory that we recollect from one side, events reported to us. We're dealing, and you said it very nicely, Eric, today government, if it does not work with the industry and with the biggest companies, will do a poor job. So we're actually in a joint venture with Google and Microsoft for doing that crystal ball and that cyber dome. We're doing things like raising campaigns of awareness from one side, but from the other side, we're trying to pass a cyber law and a cyber bill. So we're actually trying to look at all our assets, and sometimes the civilians are our assets, and look exactly what is correct for them to do. I will tell you this, the Israel government is investing and not spending, investing so much manpower and money in protecting cyber attacks that won't even penetrate the sphere of the cyber, because they will be stopped, let's say, at the borders of Israel. Now, the problem doesn't end there, because once they attack me tomorrow, as you said it very smartly, they will arrive to a seashore of someone else. So the cooperation between Israel government and 90 other countries on a day-to-day basis is the key to success, because yesterday there was a big delegation in Beersheba. United States say, how are you dealing with the Move It attack? Now, Move It attack still hasn't arrived in Israel, but it's now a big case in the United States. Now, I told them, thank you very much, not yet. Give me your information, because it will arrive here next week, and I'll be prepared. Next time, I will be the one to get the non-petya. Oh my God, no. And I will warn all the rest of the world. But it's a common business of the government, the industry, the technology we have, and the partnership with the world. So it's a big project.
You're doing a very good job.
Thank you. You're paying taxes, so I'm delivering you service.
Thank you. Since we have only 6 minutes, and before I'm going to ask all the panelists, and I'm coming back again to the subject of this panel, building cyber resilience at the organizational and national level, and each one will have 2 minutes only to answer. Be well prepared. Any other questions coming from the audience here? No. Fantastic. I give you all the time. So you heard the questions. We'll go one by one to each one of you. Meanwhile, they will remember, and we'll go on. Please, Minister.
Yeah. When the Ministry of Digital Affairs started, people focused on emergency resilience. But more and more, we think industrial and societal resilience are equally important. In the industrial part, we subsidize up to actually exactly 50% for the micro and SMEs if they purchase the kind of SaaS services that we in the government also uses in joint tender. And we have this huge list of what we call T-Cloud, the Taiwan Cloud, so that those SaaS products and services, even if just from startups, can immediately find the market in the MISMEs. And I think that really increases the moat, if not the alligators, for everybody involved in the industry. And then the societal resilience, as I mentioned, involves getting people, even in junior high school, even in primary schools, their chance to participate in cyber awareness. So in addition to this see something, say something thing, we also invite them to fact check. Fact check, for example, our 3 presidential candidates at their debate or their forum, and if they can spot the inaccuracies in their statements and so on, their name maybe appear on national live stream, right? So basically, the idea is literacy is when you consume information, competence is when you co-produce information, and only by going through this maker mindset for information, for cyber and for fact checking, does a young mind gets the curiosity to inoculate itself against the cyber attacks, the outrage, and everything bad that is happening in cyber realm. I hope that's 2 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you.
So as Eric said, I think knowing the attack surface is critical, being aware of what can be attacked, especially from, also Eric mentioned, the external attack surface is critical. This is the starting point of any successful attack. Keeping watch on that and then validating those defenses for vulnerabilities is critical for cyber resilience, but then also taking, and the part that we didn't speak about that much is actually this inoculation, which is a huge challenge, the streamlined remediation of those problems in your cyber defenses. Even though you've got the intelligence that you may know that these threats exist, that's great, but you need to close them in a timely manner. And I think you said 75% of them were one-day attacks. I think maybe in our industry it's way more. So it can pretty much be solved, But you have to take the hard step as an organization, as a government, of actually solving these issues. And I guess probably everyone here that's dealt with it understands that time to remediation is a critical parameter in preventing a successful cyber attack, and the kill chain, killing it as far out as possible, not letting it penetrate the defenses internally, is the challenge. So I think cyber resilience is being aware, remediating those problems, taking the tough decisions to remediate those problems, because that also costs money, it takes time, sometimes it's risky, and then validating that all of that actually works, because sometimes we think we've fixed stuff and it actually doesn't work. So I think identifying, patching, and doing that as quickly as possible is key to cyber resilience.
Great. Thank you. Shira, please.
I think I'll be a little bit disruptive here. I don't think there's such a thing as saying all problems at all. And I think that's part of our problem. I think we have to start thinking like attackers, looking at our network like attackers, and fixing really what matters. It's not going to be just about the basics. Some things are not about the basics. It's true, that will help, but it can't stop with that. You know, Microsoft reported 30,000 MFA fatigue attacks per month. Mind-boggling. So there's not going to be one way wins it all, and we have to start thinking differently. If you look at attackers, most of them are not necessarily tech people. They have a different way of thinking, and we have to see how we adapt that.
Great. Please.
So I think the composition of this panel suggests where we're going with resilience and how it needs to look, right? It's not an industry problem. It's not a government problem. It's a government, industry, citizen, academia. It's an everyone problem. I'm not going to have all the solutions. You're not going to have all the solutions. Work together to figure out, like, how do we combat this common thing? This becomes particularly true, I think, when we look at the adversary. It's not a criminal. It's not a state. We have criminals who are working for a state in some cases. The lines have all blurred. If we don't keep doing what we're doing, the adversary will get ahead. If we keep fighting yesterday's battle, the adversary will get ahead. It's building the skill sets as a community, and we're doing that right now. Building that skill set so that we're able to deal with whatever that challenge is tomorrow, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, please.
So everything on what the panel said already is true. Building the youth, developing and understanding what's there, attack surface. Simply put, everything, everywhere, all at once. That is what the network is. It's flat, it's everywhere. And yeah, it is the public, it's all of this. I have nothing more to add.
Thank you.
You're demoralizing us.
No, I mean, that's it. What we've discussed is...
You have only 1 minute because you have to rush to the cert. Somebody's working.
So, listen, I won't repeat. I just give an example. In order to do good resilience, we made tests. We actually approached all hackers, white hackers in Israel or worldwide, and said, look, I cannot give you bug bounty. I cannot pay you. I offered to give you a T-shirt in a city, but my government, they didn't even authorize me that. I said, okay, let's open the Hall of Fame. I will let every hacker or every white hacker in Israel try to attack any server you want. If he finds a vulnerability, you will report it to the NCD. We will patch it up and close it. And the only thing we'll do is we'll give them like a podium number 1, 2, 3 in our website. Now, at the beginning, I thought that wouldn't catch because, you know, bug bounty is very sexy. The amount of fighting over the first place is so many people are trying to, they're actually reporting to us hundreds of vulnerabilities. They're working for the nation in order to patch up systems. And that's exactly how you do resilience in a wide state. Okay, so we didn't give anything, only fame. And now fame is something very important for those guys.
It's reputation.
A reputation, exactly. So you can find a lot of methods and a lot of out-of-the-box ideas how to do good resilience. I suggest to everyone, every CEO and every personal housekeeper, cyber keeper, something, let's go to that, to open his mind and think out of the box. And maybe after your sayings, we will have a world after 2025 because it's a tough neighborhood.
Yes, we know it. So before just ending, let me say some word to you all. First of all, I thank you for coming. I think it is very important. I think this is very important, as I would say again, subject. We could not have such a huge success unless having this lady, Ronit Shapira, who helped me so much, and the whole team of ICRC and the Tel Aviv University who invited me and invited you. And going now to the panels. I want to remind you, there are names. I think you have been amazing. remember, for the audience here, is the second panel today on resilience, which is important.
We're better.
So let me just thank very much, first of all, Minister Audrey Tang for coming all the way to Taiwan. Shira Bendowski from XM Cyber. Matthew Andriani, CEO of Mazebolt. Greg Banghart, Director of Cybersecurity Policy in Canada. Erez Tidhar. By the way, he was a movie star in Israel before. It's not that he's just pretending. I cannot add more now. Go to Google. And Eric Tech from Trend Micro, who was the last to join this panel. I'm Rami Efrati. Thank you very much. And as we say in the military, drive safely. All the best to you. Good night.